What if Robyn was an ABBA protege? This week I'll be celebrating the Swedish singer who, in spite of never having quite achieved megastardom, has over the course of a 30-plus year career inspired generations of artists with her incredible knack for emotionally resonant alt-pop bangers. And as a confirmed non-ABBA fan, I'll also be taking a moment to grudgingly acknowledge the undeniable genius of the architect of the Swedish pop scene as we know it. All that and more on this week's What If, How, When, Why. Hi, my name is Morgan Brown, and each Monday I upload a new What If video to my YouTube channel, and then on Wednesdays follow it with one of these companion videos where I discuss the artists and genres involved in the What If video, and also share a little bit of my creative process. The idea of the What If videos is that every week I pick a popular song and imagine an alternative universe in which some change of circumstances causes that song to come out completely different from the version we know and love. I then take the original lead vocal of that song and record a new backing track to it using just GarageBand and whatever instruments I have around the house in order to bring that alternative version of the song to life. So the song I picked this week was Dancing on My Own by Robyn, and I tried to reimagine that in the style of ABBA. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that yet, here's a little taster. Now with most pop stars, by the time they're 30 plus years into their career, you tend to expect them to be in a bit of a legacy phase, releasing greatest hits albums, touring on their former glories, or, if they're releasing new stuff still, quite often it's a bit of a throwback to their popular earlier material. You certainly don't necessarily expect them to be releasing anything particularly exciting or new, but I don't think that's the case with Robyn at all. Whatever era of her career you land on, she always sounds very much current and even right at the cutting edge of that era's pop, which is a pretty remarkable thing to achieve. I believe in her native Sweden, she was actually something of a child star, recorded some TV theme back at the age of 12 before releasing her debut album in 1994 when she must have been, I think, 15 years old. And that album notably helped to launch the production career of Max Martin, her fellow Swede, who prior to that had been playing in hard rock bands, but made this sideways move into pop production, and then a little while after that ended up producing Britney Spears and has gone on to colossal mainstream pop success as a producer. And then a few years later, I think 1997 was the point where she actually had a proper international breakout when Show Me Love and Do You Know What It Takes, both still from that 1995 debut album, became hit singles outside Sweden and established her on the international stage. And those already really set out her stall musically, big immediate pop songs with a little bit of a US R&B influence, but then also this heavy dose of electronica, this bright, strong pop voice, and these quite emotionally resonant lyrics, which would only get stronger and more powerful with each succeeding release. And at that point, she could very easily have just become another flash-in-the-pan teen pop sensation. Very easy, particularly for young stars, to get swept up, have their talent milked by the industry for all they're worth, and then be kind of tossed aside after a couple of years. But Robyn somehow avoided that. According to Max Martin, even at a really young age, she was very willful, had very clear ideas about what she wanted, and was quite prickly and difficult to work with because she had such strong opinions on her music and how it was supposed to be. I think that's one of the things that's really helped her to survive in the industry, because while, as I said in my intro, she'd never achieved those sort of stratospheric levels of megastardom that other pop stars do, that's kind of allowed her a degree of longevity that is very rarely possible in mainstream pop. So she's just carried on through her career, pretty much doing what she wants to do, every few years reappearing with another absolutely tremendous pop record. Although I did hear those earlier singles, the first thing that really grabbed my attention was With Every Heartbeat. That was an incredible record, which came out around 2007. And I remember at the time a bunch of people going, oh, who's this new artist, Robyn? And it's like, well, not a new artist at all. It had already been around for over 10 years at that point. But again, it just sounded so fresh and current at the time that people just assumed she was this brand new artist with this new cutting edge sound. And then a few years later, she's releasing the Body Talk series of albums. And somewhere in there, there's Dancing on My Own, which again breaks out, introduces her to another whole generation of listeners. And it's not necessarily my favourite of her songs, but it's the one that seems to have had the most legs, cropping up on soundtracks of things and generating an insane amount of covers. I actually actively dislike most of the covers that I've heard of it. People tend to miss the point of the song. It's a song about heartbreak, but it's also a song about dancing, and everyone who covers it seems to turn it into some kind of horribly overwrought maudlin ballad, which to me completely robs the song of its power. But what do I know? But yeah, anyway, suffice to say that she's just carried on doing this, following her own path, largely ignoring industry trends, making the music she wants to make when she wants to make it, and influencing everyone who is making pop music along the way. All this current generation of credible pop stars all definitely owe a debt of gratitude to Robyn, not just for specific musical influence, although there is certainly plenty of that audible in stuff that you hear nowadays, but also just in terms of Robyn being one of the acts that really helped to establish straight up pop music as a critically respectable genre. The whole poptimism thing that took over music criticism in the last however many years, kind of feel like Robyn was certainly one of those people who was on the vanguard of changing attitudes towards pop, so critics could actually hear a pop record and appreciate that it has value. And I think Robyn's definitely one of the people who helped to establish that, so that's a pretty impressive legacy. I had a new album out, I think, last year. I haven't heard the whole thing, but every track I've heard from it has been fantastic. Still running rings around pop stars who are less than half her age, and I'm sure she'll continue to do so as well. But of course, long before Robyn put Sweden's stamp on 21st century pop, another group had already cemented that nation's importance as a pop music hub. That group, of course, being ABBA. Now, as I said in the intro, I've never been a particular ABBA fan. I don't know if it's just being overexposed to their music for many decades, but generally, if I hear an ABBA song when I'm out and about, or if it comes on the radio, I'm not particularly overjoyed. I don't own any ABBA records. I would never want to put an ABBA record on at home to listen to for pleasure. That said, I would never ever attempt to deny their importance or to deny the brilliance of the craft that went into producing those songs and those recordings, because they were absolute masters at their field. They're an interesting bunch too. I didn't know for years until I saw a documentary about them a while ago that all of their careers went back quite a way before the formation of ABBA, back into the 1960s, with Benny being in a rock band called the Hep Stars, I think, which is a great name. And at the same time, Björn was in a folk group called the Hootenanny Singers, and Anna Frid and Agneta were both solo performers. I think Anna Frid more in a cabaret, sort of slightly jazzy context, and Agneta in a fairly mainstream, easy-listening pop sense. So they were all already recording artists, all pretty successful in their own right. And they came together as couples, but it took quite a while for them to then also come together as musical collaborators. It was a few years before they actually formed into a proper coherent group. Not initially called ABBA either. I think they just went by their first names before, I guess, someone pointed out that their first initials could make up the name ABBA, and that was kind of catchy and with a palindrome. They were put off using that, I just discovered, by the fact that there's apparently a fish canning company in Sweden that also has the same name, and they had to request permission from the canning company in order to be able to use it, just in case anyone mistook the two brands, which is hilarious to think of now. Obviously, Waterloo for the Eurovision Song Contest was their big breakout, which, is a beast of a pop song. Daft lyrics notwithstanding, and you can totally see why it won. But it took them a little while to effectively follow that up. I think they continued to have some hits in Sweden, but internationally, for a little while there, they were considered to be a bit of a one-hit wonder. Nothing else was quite landing. I think they were trying to tap into the glam rock trend a little bit, and it wasn't really hitting outside their home country. And the real massive scale success started with the Arrival album in 1976, where they'd kind of finally shaken off those vestiges of glam and leaned much more heavily into straight up pop, and also introduced a little bit of disco. I guess the disco sound was really sort of emerging then, so that starts to creep in too, and that's where that classic ABBA production style fully sort of lands into its final form. Big lush wall of sound that they created with the multiple pianos and the stacked vocals. And I think that was the key to it, really, just this combination of elements that came together that on paper might not have seemed likely to work together, but just created magic when you combined them. The two female lead singers with these big, bright commercial voices that sounded great singing in unison, also great in these stacked harmonies that they did. These songs that in their structure quite often have a sort of near classical discipline to them, really quite beautifully, harmonically and melodically put together, but then given that danceable disco edge to stop it sounding too staid and formal. And then also this expansive Phil Spector and Brian Wilson style VistaVision Technicolor production. It really is an incredible combination of elements. And I think it's only really when I stop and examine it like this that I can really appreciate it. But yeah, it was an amazing sound, and I think if I hadn't grown up being so constantly exposed to them and then just heard them for the first time now, I'd be completely blown away by it. But yeah, anyway, that takes me up to this week's alternative universe scenario. So in my alternate timeline this week, it's very much like our own timeline, except that in this one, Robyn was born some 20 years earlier, back in 1959. So it's 1977. ABBA have been doing very well, of course. They've had the Arrival album out. They've just kind of really hit their proper commercial peak. Benny and Bjorn have been very happy about the way they've managed to perfectly hone their production style. They decided they want to branch out and apply these newfound skills to recording the next generation of Swedish pop musicians. So they start putting some feelers out, trying to find promising young performers, and eventually a tape of this young singer makes its way to them. And they're immediately struck not only with a strong kind of classic pop singing voice, but also by these songs that she's written, which are both incredibly catchy and also have a real sort of emotional depth to them. So they're completely floored by this tape, and they bring in this singer who, of course, is Robyn. And the first song they decide to cut is Dancing on My Own, which they give the full wall of sound ABBA treatment. And of course, it's a massive hit, establishing Robyn as a new star, cementing Sweden's position as an international pop powerhouse, and also establishing Benny and Bjorn as the go-to producers for the next generation of pop performers looking for a breakout hit. Oh yeah, in an attempt to create this ABBA-ified version of Dancing on My Own, as ever, my usual first step is just getting the isolated vocal, dropping that into GarageBand and syncing it up to the grid, tweak the tempo a bit. I was trying to sort of slightly match the tempo of something like Dancing Queen. I wanted to go for that laid-back, early disco, not high energy, but a bit more kind of early disco vibe, so a little bit less driving than the original tempo of the song. Next thing was popping some drums on there. Now, I've never really particularly investigated ABBA's production, but one of the enduring myths that I've heard people repeat about ABBA was that the way they got that wall of sound production style was they basically recorded the entire band twice, and they'd have a whole band over on one side of the stereo and another whole band over on the other side. Never bothered to actually investigate that or find out whether it was true or anything, but kind of had this myth in mind when I started working on this, and I was like, I wonder what it'd sound like if you actually had like two drum kits. So I tried it just to see what it sounded like. Basically tried to replicate what it sounded like having two drummers, so played the part in once on my MIDI keyboard, and then picked a different kit sound and tried to play the exact same part in as much as I could from memory. I could have just copied and pasted it over, but I didn't want it exactly duplicated. I wanted it to sound like two separate people playing the same part, and then pan that left and right. Obviously, later on, I went and actually watched a couple of things about ABBA's production and discovered that they didn't actually record two lots of drum kits, although there is a lot of layering up of instruments. Pretty much all those records only have one lot of drums on. But by that point, I'd already recorded it and decided I liked it, so I just kept it on there. Added some bass next. Again, thinking of Dancing Queen as a bit of a template, so it was only something that supported the harmony but also sounded a little bit funky without being over the top slapping and popping, so hopefully managed to achieve that. Next thing, added some guitars. I think there are 4 guitar tracks in total, a couple of rhythm tracks, an acoustic and electric, and then 2 leads. So rhythm tracks, electric on one side, acoustic on the other, both just playing slightly funkily strummed chords. And then the pair of lead guitars, I decided I wanted a bit of a sort of harmony guitar hook, because that's a thing that ABBA like to do on a few of those old records. Knowing Me, Knowing You, I think, has got some of those. I decided it'd be quite fun to have some of those, so I just came up with a little melody and harmonised it. Bit of a sort of 70s fuzz tone on both of them, a little smidge of chorus just to make everything sound a bit smooth. So that just crops up in between verses and choruses as well, just adding an extra little melodic motif. Next thing after that, I wanted some keyboards on there. Now, a bunch of ABBA stuff does have synths, but I didn't really want to go for the synth route. Again, thinking of Dancing Queen, I just like that big chiming piano sound, so it went for not 1 but 2 pianos. One's more of a rhythm piano, it's playing a chordal pattern that's almost like a proto-house pattern, just this rhythmic vamp, keeping the rhythm going, but also just filling out that harmony as well. And then on the other side, we've got more of a lead piano that's playing mostly little bits of melody and octaves, quite sort of forcefully with triplet rhythms and a few kind of big chiming chords, that kind of thing. So just adding a bit more of that sense of almost neoclassical drama to things that you hear on some of those ABBA records as well. And then to make everything a little bit more lush, I thought we definitely needed some strings. So I just added some violins, big, long, kind of sweeping lines that just add a bit more emotionality and sentimentality to the sound, make everything sound a lot more lush and almost verging on saccharine. It was already starting to sound kind of where I wanted it to be, but there was still a couple of things missing, one of which was the big stacked harmonies that you hear on those records. The vocal track already had Robyn's own vocal harmonies, which are great, but I think for the ABBA sound, you also need those male voices in there as well. It just adds a bit more richness. I'm not a great singer, so I didn't want anything too high up, but I added a bunch of extra backing vocals. I think 8 tracks in all, so 4 lines doubled. So it got quite cumbersome, so I ended up mixing them all down onto a single track, just kind of compressed together. So that's just in the intro and the outro and the choruses as well. Just an extra thing, kind of lurking in the background, but just bolstering those vocals and just adding a bit more depth. And then as a final touch, just added some more percussion, because I really want to reinforce that rhythm, make sure people can dance to it. So tambourines and shakers, just going along with those 4 on the floor drums and just kind of keeping that sort of pulsating rhythm going along. Should also say, I didn't mention before, arrangement-wise, I made quite a lot of changes too, because the original song, it's pretty simple harmonically. It's like 3 or maybe 4 chords in total, which is not to say anything bad about it. It works brilliantly like that, but that's not a thing ABBA would ever do. They were far too clever for their own good to just use 3 or 4 chords, so I pretty substantially reharmonized it, just trying to add some slightly more elaborate voicings, passing chords, just the kind of things that you would hear in an ABBA song. Make it sound a bit less stark and a bit more lush, and definitely quite a lot more 70s. And then for the video, started out as ever by just finding some performance footage of Robyn singing the song around when it came out. Sync that up to my track, intercut it with some bits from an ABBA performance with just Benny and Bjorn playing their instruments in their shiny satin jackets that they were wont to wear in those days. So a little bit of that in there too, just to imply that they're there backing her up. And then to go along with the theme of dancing on my own, I thought, well, let's find some lone disco dancers to throw into the mix. So found some footage of the World Disco Dance Championships. I think it was the 1979 edition that I used this time. So just loads of individual disco dancers giving it their all on the dance floor there, and I thought that went quite nicely too, so just blended them in between the performance footage to complete the picture. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I had a great time doing it. Although I've never been a massive ABBA fan, it was a fun sound to try and recreate, and The song's obviously a massive banger, and it was nice to try and create a new version of it that didn't fall into the dull ballad trap that everyone else seems to. So it was a really fun challenge. If you did enjoy it, please feel free to drop us a little comment, like, share, subscribe. All that stuff really helps the channel. I'd be eternally grateful. If there's anything else you'd like me to do in coming weeks and months, any artists or songs or genres you'd like me to take a look at, do let me know. Your suggestions are always welcome. But otherwise, that's all from me for this time. So thanks very much indeed for watching, and I'll hope to see you next time.